I'm an American, and I went off the deep end.
Ed Kemper has been serving a life sentence in this California prison since 1973, when, at the age of 24, he murdered his mother, then called police and confessed to having dismembered college co-eds for 2 years, as well as cannibalizing and raping their headless bodies.
When someone abandons himself to being a victim, he's going to have to be one.
With an IQ of 136, Kemper is now the prison's best reader of books for the blind.
I'm saying I'd wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about, and then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people. It started coming to a head again, so I went back down. I ran away back down there. And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them. It made it worse to be on top of a mountain. I was literally on top of a mountain when it happened. And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me. And I knew I was paranoid at that moment. I knew anybody that came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or quizzical look, I'd have blown their brains out thinking they were coming to get me. And if it had been in a city, I would have been a mass murderer at age 15. I would have killed until they gunned me down. I wouldn't have been able to reason my way out of it. I was scared to death, and I was violent. I felt my back hit that wall. I was the rabbit that always ran, that always backed away, always burned his bridges. And suddenly there weren't any more, and my back hit that wall, and I came out screaming and kicking and shooting.
He was released to the one person that authorities at the state mental hospital recommended he never see again.
I got paroled to my mother. Atascadero decided that I didn't never need to talk to her again at all. Don't give her a Christmas present. Leave her alone. She got her pound of flesh out of you. I wasn't sniveling about my mother to them. I didn't like to hear what they had to say about her. She went through 3 husbands like a hot knife through butter. 4 months after I was out, I was back into the fantasy bag. My first date was an absolute disaster. It wasn't her fault. You know? And I didn't blame her even then. I'm saying it was a terrible tragedy, but boy, she didn't ever talk to me again. It was awful. It wasn't sexual or grabbing at her or nothing. I was just such a dork, taking her to a John Wayne movie and Denny's. It's terrible. I'd never been on a date. At 16, that was cool, you know. I'd never been on a date, you know. I was locked up since I was 15. But I can't tell her that. Oh, gee, you don't mind me. You know, she kind of got hung up on my looks or whatever. You know, I mean, she's a gorgeous young lady. Pure class, and she saw something there that I guess wasn't there, and boy, she found out quick.
Taking elaborate precautions, he drove around universities and picked up hitchhiking co-eds while wearing these glasses.
Yeah. These are the ones. Now, would you get in the car with this man? Huh? The state has made me much more credible as a human being.
While his mother worked at the university, Kemper buried the mutilated bodies in the mountains and took the severed heads home. Then he slept with their heads for days and finally went looking for more.
But I was losing a grasp on something that was too violent to keep inside forever. As I'm sitting there with a severed head in my hand, talking to it, or looking at it, and I'm about to go crazy, literally. I'm about to go completely flywheel loose and just fall apart. I say, wow, this is insane. And then I told myself, no, it isn't. You're saying that, and that makes it not insane. I said, I'm sane, and I'm looking at a severed... I said, well, wait a minute. I see old paintings and drawings of Viking heroes talking to severed heads and taking them to parties, old enemies in leather bags. Part of our heritage. This is me back then in 1972 and 73. Unable to live with the fact that I just stabbed to death and cut the throat of an innocent young woman. Innocent in the sense that she did not plan on that happening. She didn't do anything specifically for that to happen to her. Yet she was a very active participant in her own death. And in my memory of that, she was 19 years old, and her roommate in the trunk who died right after that was 18. I didn't go hog wild and totally limp. What I'm saying is I found myself doing things in an attempt to make things fit together inside. I was doing sexual probings and things. I mean, in the sense of striking out and reaching out and grabbing and pulling to me but appalled at the sense that it wasn't working. That isn't the way it's supposed to be. It isn't the way I want it. See what I'm saying? And yet during that time, I become engaged to someone who's young and is beautiful and very much the same advantages and very much the same upbringing and Disneyland values. And she's very much the reason I surrendered. I picked up two girls who were so much like the first two, it was unbelievable. Almost identical circumstances. And I let them go. Everything went towards killing them, and I didn't. But I'm saying, wow, it's uncanny. It was almost like it was meant to be that way. And I said, wow, this got to stop. And I let them out. They never even knew what was going on. I let them out. I would have gotten away with those two being murdered. I said, no, it's got to stop. And a week later, I murdered my mother. Went back to Santa Cruz and killed her.
He killed her with a hammer in her sleep, cut off her head and hands, but then put her vocal cords in the garbage disposal and threw darts at her severed head.
I am an American, and I killed Americans. I am a human being, and I killed human beings. And I did it in my society.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. I was getting less detectable. I started flaunting that invisibility, severing a human head, two of them, at night in front of my mother's residence, with her at home, my neighbors at home upstairs, their picture window open, the curtains open, 11 o'clock at night, the lights are on, all they have to do is walk by, look out, and I've had it. And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away, and answer the door, and the landlady would be there, and we'd discuss it.
Discuss what?
Reality. Her reality, not mine. Some people go crazy at that point. I felt it. It was one hell of a tweak. I mean, to just flip out and not know where I was. To be walking up the stairs with a camera bag that belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so dramatic, so amazing, so violent, that really, I could feel the wheels squeaking inside. That was really pulling on it. And I imagine at that point some people break. But I didn't literally go insane. I didn't get lost. And for 2 months I hadn't killed. And I said, it's not going to happen to any more girls. It's got to stay between me and my mother, and I can't get away from her. We're still fighting. She's still belittling me. I'm like a puppet on a string, and I entertain her. She knows all my buttons, and I dance like a puppet with that pain. And it had even gotten physical, to where I had physically grabbed her and thrown her onto her bed, trying to emphasize a point that I was threatening to kill her. So here I pick up these two young ladies in Berkeley, on Ashby Avenue. One has flowers in her hand, petite little dolls. They're in granny dresses, and they're hitchhiking, a couple of real experts. I want to see how together I am, if I can resist this temptation.
You going to Walnut Creek? Great.
And they get in my car. They want to go one way. I know they need to go the other. If they go the way they're insisting on, we're headed right back out to where the first two co-eds were murdered. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, all I got to do is relax, and they'll take me to their death. I've got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted. As gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college.
Thanks a lot.
That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that. I came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback, as many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. And I looked at her, I said, "No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold and so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. It came out of my mother. And in a rage, I went right back in. For 7 years, she said, I haven't had sex with a man because of you, my murderous son. It was one of our arguments. I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. It's there, you know? A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. I altered, well, they weren't really spontaneous. I altered how I approached these young ladies from the point of capture. From the first time, what I had wanted to do was to secure them and to suffocate them with plastic bags over their heads. I had some completely unrealistic perspective that was quick, that they would lose consciousness rapidly. But the first young lady that was in the back seat, it was Mary Ann Pesh. I finally secured her. She argued a lot. She was dialoguing, trying to change up control of the situation. She had already decided I was in control. I was trying to gain control. I was convinced she was in control of it. So for about 20 minutes we were arguing back and forth over what was going to happen, and I was trying to keep it away from what was intended, which was murder. And I decided at that time I wasn't going to tell anyone I was going to rape them. I didn't say that at the time, but I left that wide open as the avenue that it's going to be a sexual release. And that got them very distressed. And it was obvious to me that if I was going to pursue what I was doing, that distress had to stop. So I went into a, unfortunately, more effective behavior of letting them help me. I let more of my personality come out, and I was suicidal, very disturbed, grasping out at someone. I had abducted them, and I wasn't going to let them out of the car because I was tired of people walking away from me. So some of that was very true, but I manipulated that to allow them to help me to the point of resolving their behavior until we got to a place where they could be killed. And that is, I have the biggest problem with that on a guilt basis, because obviously that entailed unusual trust between the captor or the perpetrator and the victim of the crime. At one point, in fact, on the fourth victim of the crime, Miss Shaw, she actually got back into the trunk under her own power. I had a cast on my left arm, it was broken. And I walked her back to the trunk of the car, where I told her I was going to keep her undercover so that I could get her to my home where we could talk. But I didn't want neighbors seeing her coming to the house or leaving the house. And I made that sound realistic to her. So she didn't want to get in the trunk, but was willing to. When she got in the trunk, I shot her. So I'm trying to remember this from a long time ago, but another round had entered and exited that padding area. So there were 3 holes in that padding area that was head level with her. It was off to her right, to my left. She was moving about in the back quadrant there, trying to avoid the shots. That wouldn't have happened. I realized if I'd never done it, it wouldn't have happened, but Well, my original intention was to make it very quick and neither one of them to be aware of what was happening, and it was not to keep them from stopping the crime, it was to keep them from suffering. I had a real bad problem depriving people of their lives. It wasn't the aspect of killing them, it was the aspect of possessing their bodies afterwards. So it was almost after an effect, evicting someone from their human body. And I'm sorry it sounds so cold, but that's about what it analogizes to. At the time, I wanted my case to look like random killings, unrelated. As you know, there was no real understanding of serial killing at the time. And when I told the police, they asked me how many people I thought I could have killed in the fashion that I did. Out of the approximately 1,000 individuals that got in my car over a 3-year period that I was out there, this being a hobby, a side hobby of mine, I'm just driving around. I love to drive and picking up anybody who wanted a ride. And then later on, focusing on more difficult cases, people I was convinced wouldn't want to get in because I'm a single male young adult, two-door car. They're not going to want to get in and ride with me. I made that a challenge, almost like a chess game. And the more clever they got about checking me out ahead of time, the more clever I got about appearing innocuous and in a hurry and a businessman. And the best one for assuaging that last check of me was just to glance at my watch and look slightly irritated and, oh, well, I guess I can stop and give this person a ride. It seemed to have a very positive effect, even with the most sophisticated hitchers, which included the Passion Luchesa girls, the first 2 victims.
So really, you're a psychologist in your own right from the standpoint of how to size up people, how they'll respond to you.
How about sociologist and at a very lay level? A psychiatrist is looking for pathology. I was looking for ways to influence people.
Yeah, okay.